Hello there and welcome back to another review. So before Guillermo del Toro hit the big time in America with Hollywood movies with Hellboy, Pan's Labyrinth, Shape of Water, he made this 1997 creature feature horror Mimic, starring Mira Sorvino and Josh Brolin, which for some reason when it came out back in the day, I always used to get this movie Mimic mixed up with the movie The Relic. For some reason, Mimic, Relic, I do not know why I got them confused. Maybe it's because the titles sort of sound the same. I have no idea. But yeah, I used to get it confused with that, but both have 5 letters. I don't know. Both have IC at the end. It's just how my mind works. Now, what is interesting with this movie, if they're even as early as 1997, you see a lot of Del Toro's hallmarks, like some of his traits in this movie. There's a lot to be said about this movie. It's one of them movies that I was always curious about seeing. I saw it back in the day. But you do see a lot of his trademarks, or even let's just say things that he would later go on to sort of become his motifs and themes in his movies. Monsters, the dark, insects, things like that. And I think a certain producer named H. Weinstein clashed with Del Toro a lot on the production of this movie. I'm not going to say anything about that guy that hasn't been said already, but apparently he had no faith in Del Toro whatsoever. So much so that I think even now Del Toro, I think he said quite openly that Mimic was one of the worst experiences he ever had, sort of as a director. It was very, very hard, and it must be extremely frustrating if you're a filmmaker. And the powers that be, whoever it is, the producers or the money people, whatever, and they're sort of, we know more, we know best, you do what we say. And it's like the filmmaker, and he's trying to do art and he's trying to create something, and it must be really hard when there's, regardless of all the money that's involved, but when you have people, with any job, if you've got somebody breathing down your neck all the time, it must be incredibly frustrating. But I think he said it's one of the worst experiences he ever had in his life when he was making this movie, and just showing you how toxic the environment must have been when making it. I don't even think he had a say over the final cut, but I think he did his own cut in 2010. There was even 2 direct video sequels to this movie, the third of which starred Lance Henriksen. I think even a TV show reboot is in the works, with Paul W.S. Anderson having something to do with it. Not actually sure what is happening with that. By the time this video comes out, it might have even already been on streaming. I don't know, but I think Paul W.S. Anderson has something to do with it. Now, is Mimic any good? Well, I remember seeing this back in the day and how fresh it felt. It's not like things were happening in the plot that were sort of groundbreaking. And believe me, a lot of the classic horror things you come to expect, were very much there. But Del Toro's style here is so visual, as always, and absorbing. I'd say even as early as 97, you can tell this was a filmmaker with something new to say, who had more of a fresh approach and was going to do things a bit differently. I say very visual and absorbing. You couldn't help but be drawn into Mimic. And at the time, 12, 13-year-old me absolutely loved it. I thought it was a great film. Watching it again recently, it is a bit somewhat predictable and a bit cheesy in places, but it's got, it's got Del Toro's name all over it, this movie. And as I say, even in this, you still get parts of his visual style that he would later, become his trademark and what he's known for. The film is no classic, believe me, but for 1997, there are a lot worse films coming out, that's for sure. Mimic just felt like a film that had a filmmaker who, had a fresh approach with something new to say, even though, of course, at the time I had no idea who he was and what he was going to go on to do. I mean, he had only one film at this point, and that was, I think it was Kronos, made in 1993. I think that was the only film Del Toro had actually done at that point. And Del Toro is very much like a James Cameron, really. He's not necessarily directed a huge amount of movies. His filmography is not entirely massive. It's not a sprawling, God, look at all the films he's made or anything like that. But a lot like James Cameron. And they're not directed a hell of a lot. Their filmography is not hugely expansive. But their impact is second to none on the industry, regardless, if that makes sense. Now, watching this now, you might think, okay, it's a bit of a tame movie, it's a bit predictable, or even not, to be honest, not overly that scary, but I still think for its time and the atmosphere and the dark noir sort of Gothic atmosphere that goes on with this movie, and the Mimic creates, I just think it's still a good film and still worth a watch and a movie you can have a good time with. So the film, like this film, probably has one of the most distressing openings to a movie ever, with loads of kids sick and ill because of like Strickler's disease. Susan Tyler, Savino's character, went after like some cockroaches. It turns out they are like the carriers. She uses termite and mantis DNA to wipe them out, which she called the Judas breed. So she carries it in like a jar and everything is fine. She and her other half, Peter, played by Jeremy Northam, are celebrating like a job well done, like they've eradicated this disease, they've cured it, they've saved the day. Then we see like this old man running and falling to his death from something. We don't know what. There's the air of mystery. Who was he running from? What was going on? We're not too sure at this point. So which this kid watches as his body gets dragged into the sewer. So the next morning, the CDC, Centre for Disease Control and Prevention, for those of you who don't know, and that is who her husband works for, by the way, and cops find this place full of bacteria and poo, and was run by Harry Ping, a priest who is the guy who got dragged into the sewer. You with me so far? I'm like, again, as always, I sometimes just glance over the plot. I just sometimes whip through the film as quick as possible, so I do not want to keep you here too long. We have these kids that obviously for some reason have no parents, no school, and like or nothing better to do, just catch bugs for Savino. Like these kids just catch bugs for her. Like they have this thing where they just bring her bugs for cash, and this is what they do. But so they obviously have no parents, no guardians, nothing better to do. They got these two boys that do that. As this they bring her this like these creatures, and there's this weird like creature, this shadowy figure watches from outside, and that's what I loved about Mimic. I mean, talking about it now, remember watching it for the first time, it was just that air of mystery with this. Like I say, you knew something was there, you couldn't quite figure out what it was, and like I say, that shadowy figure lurking in the darkness, and it, as I say, very, again, like with Del Toro, very visual film, but it did have that air of sort of like horror mystery, like who is that, look, keeps watching, like what has happened, and you know, like where is that person from, what are they after, what is going on. But I think that was quite cool. So as I say, they catch bugs for her, and that was what was so cool about this movie. You had no idea what it was going to look like and how scary and frightening the design is, etc. It's always like lurking in the shadows in that brilliant Del Toro style. So they find buttons in the poo at Ping's place. I will try to stop mentioning the word poo, I promise. So these kids bring her this massive bug. Like, this thing is huge, and our mysterious bug guy in the shadow sneaks in to get it back. As I say, as early as this film is, the film, like I mentioned, has Del Toro. It is his film. You can tell it is very much a Guillermo del Toro movie. It's just right there. It's also one of them movies, thinking about it, that's a lot like The Crow, a lot like Seven, where it just seems to always be raining at night. Like, this city is in like constant darkness all the time. It seems like, you know, bright and like sunlight and blue skies doesn't ever happen in this universe. So it just seems it's always miserable, raining, dark, and all them things. So the boy who saw the creature, he's autistic, and his name is Choi, and there's like Echolea too, and he spots this creature again and calls him Mr. Funny Shoes. Echolalia, or is that how you pronounce it? And calls him Mr. Funny Shoes. Oh, and he lives right opposite Ping's place as well. You know, he lives right opposite where this guy sort of got taken into the sewers. So Tyler finds out the bug matches the DNA with the Judas breed, and the breed was meant to have this breed that she created was meant to have like a short lifespan, so should have been eradicated. But lo and behold, guess what? They are breeding. So this is what happens when you bring genetic engineering into things. You know, really shouldn't do that sometimes. You should have just left it. So her and Peter go with the two boys to find out where they found this massive bug, where they find this abandoned room at the subway station. They do address they are breaking in and entering as they just go in there. Tyler meets Choi, the boy at the station. His guardian Manny works as a shoe shiner, and you will recognise this guy, Giancarlo Giannini. Most notably, he was in like Casino Royale with Daniel Craig. You will recognise the guy. So the boys go off and find this giant egg along the subway, and they're like, yeah, cut it open, right? They find this giant egg, and they're like, cut it open. Is that what, you know, she'll give us at least $40. Bearing in mind this egg is absolutely massive. I mean, it's the last thing I would want to do is cut this egg open. And then the weird, creepy bug dude approaches them, and we see like a dead dog, and these two are actually killed. Like, these two boys are actually killed, which I didn't expect coming. I thought it was going to be like Jurassic Park, like the kids are safe, there's going to be no kids die in this movie, but like they're there till the end, but no, these kids absolutely get killed. So hubby gets them some permits, and Tyler goes to see her teacher, Dr. Gates, who tells her like the world is bigger lab, and like some of the breed survived. I always remember this guy F. Murray Abraham. He's been in loads of movies, but most of those people I always remember him from Scarface. So Choi, the boy, goes to investigate the condemned building opposite where he lives, just walks right on over there, uses his spoons that he has to communicate with the creature and mimic their sounds. He is then approached by some of them, and it fades out. So he mimics the sounds. The title of the film's Mimic. See what they did there. So he sort of goes over to investigate. Manny finds Choi missing. Susan and her friend Remy get the corpse from their friend Norman Reedus, who works in the sewer, who would later work with Del Toro again on Blade 2. Manny gets a hunch that Choi is in the building opposite where he lives, and it makes you laugh. Like, they live opposite this building. It's like the most creepiest, like, say, condemned, and it's also like sort of a crime scene as well. So you probably might put two and two together. That might be where Choi wandered off to. So Mira Sorvino's like, her teacher predicts that after seeing the specimen that it's all part of a colony. So whilst her husband Peter and Josh Brolin are investigating the sewers with this cop, they find this old sort of armory station, and this giant insect just grabs Susan, right, and flies off with her through the tunnels. And you have to love the I'm on a train platform all on my own cliche. Like, it's always funny when people get nabbed or something happens, like at a subway station. There's not one single other soul on the station. So it's, as I say, it's just I'm on a platform all on my own routine, which is a bit downright convenient. And now I love when Susan's like waiting, like wanted, but she's like down there, she's wanting to get out and not draw attention to herself. She just shouts for help as loud as she can at this sidewalk, like sort of railing that's sort of above her. Peter and the cop get trapped and send Josh to go and get help, and yes, he gets killed too. Josh Brolin doesn't make it till the end either. Josh Brolin actually gets killed. The creature design in this is a mixture of practical effects and CGI, which for the most part works. And if you enjoyed, like I mentioned, like the movie like The Fly with Jeff Goldblum and like giant bugs and insects, then you'll probably find a lot to enjoy here. So if you're into your insects, you're into your bugs, you're into your big insects and bugs, then you're going to find loads to enjoy here. And just by chance, Manny finds Susan, who then both proceed to rendezvous with Peter and the cop Leonard, and they all take refuge in this subway car as they avoid giant insects. Leonard gets his leg messed up as like he blasts the hell out of the thing. So whilst all this is going on, Susan is never too busy to work on a theory, and her theory is thus: she has come up with a theory. She discovers, like, basically it has lungs and insects don't have lungs, and think when they sped up the metabolism, it advanced it thousands of generations, that evolved to mimic and look like us. Right? That's sort of what basically this thing sort of mutated, and it's sort of grown, and it's just sort of become so like sort of advanced in like sort of over the generations, because it's been sped up, that it's sort of designed to sort of mimic and look like humans, is sort of what they did. I say had to get the film title in there. So after some altercation, Susan rips apart one of the creatures and starts smearing the insides on each other to hide their scent, even on the windows too. Whole reason being so it won't attack them and think, like they're one of theirs, like they're one of their own. So Peter and Manny agree to go out and try to rewire the car. We'll say the film does slow down a bit here. Mimic does rely a bit on a gimmick. Like that one? Like just this group of people trapped in a subway car, but it's easy to see what they were going for. But it does, as I say, it does slow down a little bit, unfortunately. As I say, it just has some of your typical Hollywood cliches. I mean, what about the two boys that were killed? Do they have parents? Should someone notify their next of kin? They don't seem to be too concerned with that. There is quite a cool scene where Peter is trying to connect the green and blue wires, and one of the breed with a human face is next to him, and then it sort of opens up, which is quite a cool scene. Which, I'd say, there are moments here and there where you do get a bit of that Del Toro flair. Like I say, that was all practical, and then they switched to CGI for the walk-in shots, which I'd say the CGI and practical effects, the way they mishmash them up, is quite well done. So the CGI doesn't always, look fantastic, but it does the job. As soon as we must kill the male, then they can't breed. You see, that's the whole plan. Like, she's kill the male, there'll be no more of them. Let's just eradicate the male. Manny randomly finds Chewie and then he gets killed. Sort of could see that one coming. Leonard sacrifices himself. Peter uses like a dumb waiter to save Susan and Choi. And as I say, the creature design and overall look of the insects is for the most part really good. And thankfully, like I mentioned with the CGI, it's only used as and when it is needed. Like they don't, I think Del Toro made a conscious effort not to go completely overboard with the CGI, because especially in the 90s, it was at that time where, sort of after Jurassic Park, like the technology, it was changing, CGI was used more and more, and I think sometimes intelligent filmmakers were very careful not to use it too much, not to be too dependent upon it, because the technology wasn't necessarily quite there yet. As I say, it's only used when it is needed. So Peter finds a nest which looks more like something out of Alien, and also spots a gas pipe, so you can sort of see where this is going. If you've got some eggs, these creatures that you don't want, there's also a gas pipe there as well. You can probably put two and two together as to what's going to happen. He smashes the pipe and sets fire to the nest, which actually blows up half the street above, which again visually doesn't look all that bad at all. I think the film is too dark, not in its tone, just visually. It's a very darkly lit movie, and one you definitely have to watch with the lights off. This isn't the kind of movie you can watch on a bright sunny day. It's definitely not that kind of movie. And we finally see the male approaching Choi, and you're expecting, like, when it's like the male and you're expecting like a big creature design or like something that's going to really be different from what you've seen so far, and you think it's going to be a real, oh my god, that the creature at the end of that. The trouble is with this, it looks no different for the most part to all the other bugs we have seen so far. That's the only problem with it. Like, it looks no different at all. It was somewhat of a letdown. It was a bit of a letdown. Like, it just doesn't look any different. Just does not look any different. So her and Choi are on the tracks, and she leads it towards her with blood as the train is coming. Only snag with that plan is, okay, yeah, the train is of course going to smash the crap out of the male, but Choi is on the tracks too. Like, this plan that you're about to do is not completely foolproof, because Choi's on the tracks. You're leading like a great big like train coming at you, and Choi is there as well. Like, he was on the tracks, but lo and behold, he manages to get off the tracks somehow. Like, the very next shot, Susan, Peter and Choi are sort of, they're done. And like, so they're on the stairs, and it ends with all three having a hug, and I assume they all went off to play happy families, and ends with Susan's mentor saying nothing could have survived down there. And that's sort of the end of Mimic, really. A lot of the characters die. I don't think they were too concerned about the two boys that died earlier in the movie, but there was a hint at the start of the movie that her husband and her were trying to get a baby, so I assume they took in Choi, and like I mentioned, they all went off to play happy families. But it's not a brilliant movie, but it's it's definitely a Del Toro movie. It's a very claustrophobic movie, and it's definitely in the vein. It's got that visual look of, say, something like The Crow or Seven, where it is very dark all the time. It's a dark, entertaining creature feature from Del Toro. Whilst, of course, far from his best work, it's amazing that even as early as 1997, you could tell this was very much a visual filmmaker who obviously would go on to do much better things. Just a shame. It's just a real shame he had such a really crappy time making this movie, because it's one of them movies that, say he didn't make it then and he was going to make it now, I'd imagine, obviously he would have so much more creative control. They probably would do things a lot differently with this movie. But as I say, if you've only seen sort of Del Toro movies like Shape of Water or Pan's Labyrinth, obviously the Hellboy movies, Blade 2, make sure to go and check out Mimic for like sort of one of his first sort of Hollywood efforts, because it's really not that bad. It's really not a bit tame watching it again in places, but as I say, it's worth watching just to see how much of like Del Toro's filmmaking techniques and style is very much present in Mimic. So if you have seen Mimic, let me know what you think of it. Did you enjoy it? Do you think it's up there with one of Del Toro's best, or do you think it's not one of his better efforts? Make sure to let me know. So thank you very much indeed for watching. Hope you enjoyed the review, and I'll see you again soon.
Don't concentrate on the finger, or you will miss all that heavenly glory.